It was the kind of secret no one could ever prepare for. A secret that wouldn't just shatter hearts, but destroy lives. And somehow, by some cruel twist of fate, it became his life. David stared at the photograph in his hand, his breath caught in his throat. The picture showed a young woman, barely out of her teens, cradling a baby. At first glance, it looked like any old photo, a mother and child, smiling at the camera, frozen in time. But his eyes locked onto the hospital bracelet on the infant's wrist, the tiny letters that sent a cold shock through his entire body. The name, Chijioke. David's blood ran cold. He knew that name. It was his own name. The one he had been given at birth, before being adopted and renamed. He had been 5 years old when his life was wiped clean and he was sent to live with a new family. He hadn't heard or thought of that name in decades, but now it stared back at him from a photograph he should never have found. He turned to Elizabeth, his wife of 2 years, sitting beside him on the couch, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. Who is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled softly, a sad nostalgia in her eyes. "That's me, holding my first child," she said, her voice tender. "I was very young, just a teenager. I had him when I was 16. But I lost him, they took him away. My family made me give him up." David felt the world tilt on its axis. His pulse pounded in his ears as her words sliced through him like a blade. Asterisk her child? She gave up her first child, asterisk. His hand trembled as he set the photograph down, his mind racing. He could barely process what she was saying. The dates. The baby's name. It didn't add up. It couldn't add up. He shot up from the couch, his heart hammering in his chest. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice shaking as the unbearable truth crawled into the light. "That baby, it's me." She froze, the smile vanishing from her face. "What are you talking about?" David's words came tumbling out, each one feeling heavier than the last. "I was born with that name. Chijioke. I was adopted when I was 5. I never knew my birth mother. But I've always had that name, buried somewhere in the back of my mind. That's me in the photo, Elizabeth. I'm your son." Elizabeth's face drained of color as the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Her eyes widened in horror, her body recoiling as if from a sudden, violent blow. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. No, that's impossible." But the truth was already there, hanging in the air between them, thick and suffocating. There was no mistaking it now. The pieces had fallen into place with devastating clarity. David, the man she had married, the man she had loved, was the same baby she had been forced to give up all those years ago. Her son. The room filled with a suffocating silence as they stared at each other, both trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. David felt sick to his stomach, his mind spinning with the unimaginable horror of what they had unknowingly done. They had committed the unthinkable. They had married. Loved. Lived as husband and wife for 2 years. All while sharing the deepest bond of all, one of blood. Elizabeth collapsed onto the floor, her body racked with sobs as the weight of it all crushed her. "I didn't know. I didn't know," she wept, repeating the words over and over as if they could somehow absolve her from the truth. David could barely breathe, his world crumbling around him. He wanted to scream, to run, to tear away from her and everything they had built. But no amount of running could undo the unspeakable. He had married his mother. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating him as the enormity of their twisted fate settled like a dark, heavy cloud. There was no going back. No undoing what had been done. The life they had shared, the love they had known, it was all poisoned now. A love that should never have existed. "I need to go," he choked out, his legs barely able to carry him as he stumbled toward the door. Elizabeth didn't try to stop him. She couldn't. The truth had broken her, shattered her completely. She remained on the floor, her sobs echoing through the empty house, a mother mourning not just her lost son, but the life they had unknowingly shared. David never looked back. He left that night, disappearing into the darkness, haunted by the weight of what they had become. Some secrets should stay buried. Because when they're uncovered, they don't just tear apart lives, they destroy everything.